Hello again. Welcome to Discovering the Real God, or welcome back, I should say, to some. We're looking at a question today. What makes God answer? You might say, what makes God answer prayer? But it's not always something that you ask God. It's not always a prayer. But speaking of prayer, when I was young in the Lord, a new convert, if you will, I was told in the church that God always answers prayer. Now, when I look back, I can't understand why that particular statement was ever voiced. It's simply not true. Once again, I believed what I was told, only to find out from the Bible, and that in probably the last 12 years or so, I guess, when I was started to discover the real God for myself, I found a lot of the things that were told me in church as a young Christian, as a developing in the faith. I found that a lot of the things were simply not true. I don't want to say that people were lying, because I don't think there was any intention there to deceive. Nevertheless, it was things that were just throwaway statements. It was, if you like, it was the traditions of the elders, not biblical truth. And so really, no matter what I say, it was a lie, even though it was unintentional. I don't know about you, but I want to live in truth. I am hoping to be a disciple of Christ, and He is truth. The truth is a person, and I want to abide in Him and live according to what He has given us. The new covenant, to live under that covenant of love and fruitfulness and righteousness that He left for us before He comes again, to see how we got on, really, because that's what He's going to do. He's going to come back and see will I find faith when I come back? What did you do with the talents I gave you? I'm bringing my rewards with me. What's He going to find? I want to live in truth. I don't want to live by what other Christians have said, that they have been passed to them and it's been passed down. I want to live in truth, and so should you. If you're watching this and if you're seeking God, surely that's what we should all be looking for. What pleases the Father? Because it will please Jesus if we're seeking to please the Father. That's what He's there for. He came to point the way to the Father. He's our intermediary. And He is ultimately, He's our role model, whether we like it or not. Very difficult. It's a very difficult act to follow, as they say. So where do we begin? Looking at the question, what makes God answer our prayers? I don't necessarily mean a prayer in that request, asking God for something, to provide something, or indeed asking for someone else, for God to provide for someone else. All legitimate things. It's not necessarily that is the whole question. Because, for example, you might want to ask God something for yourself that is wisdom. You might want to know how to do something. You might want to be able to do something that in your own power and intellect you cannot do for yourself, and you believe that that's in God's plan for you. If God's sent you in a certain direction and you say, well, I've come to this place, God sent me here, but I can't do what he's asked me to do. That's wonderful as far as God's concerned, because that's what he wants you to do, the things that you can't do in yourself. I've had that many occasions. I was an engineer when I left school. I went into engineering and I trained as an engineer. But when I came to know the Lord, it was a paradigm shift. I went into healthcare, and God, it was the speed of light, really, that God took me through promotion and elevated me. It was an amazing. Well, I've almost finished a book on the subject, actually. But the thing is that I remember particularly that I had just finished a degree in oncology, and God took me through all of that. When I first began to learn the academic side of healthcare, I failed. I failed all my exams. I failed the tests. The only thing that got me through was the fact that I was working on placements with other healthcare professionals, and I got good reports back, and that kept me. I wasn't thrown out of the course because of that. But God, when God got hold of me, it was an amazing turnaround. And after that, God promoted me, and I had to do a degree. I had to do it. It was part of my job. I had to do a degree in oncology, and after that, I was required to do a prescribing course, which meant I could prescribe any drug on the British National Formulary as a doctor would do, because that's how I ended up as an advanced practitioner, which meant I was working autonomously and independently as a doctor would, at perhaps a different level. Nevertheless, I could not get to grips with the pharmacology exam. I just couldn't do it. My memory, I just didn't have that kind of mind. I didn't have that memory to remember all of the technical names that were required to meet the standard. I just simply couldn't do it. No matter how I spent hours trying to do it, but I just couldn't do it. And I went into the exam, really, to be honest, it might sound faithless, but I went into the exam expecting to fail. And I'd failed exams before, and God had taken me through, so I wasn't really worried about that, because I believed God, no matter what happened, God would be able to somehow work it. Nevertheless, I went into the exam with that mindset, really, and I got such a shock when I passed, and I knew. I'm not just saying, these are not just words. I knew in my knowing, in my heart, in my intellect, in my spirit, I knew that of my own volition, I could not have passed that exam. I knew that God had put his hand upon me in that period of time and brought me through and helped me. So, having said that, we're looking at beyond prayer. What made God do that for me? He didn't do it for me, actually. He did it because it's part of his plan. That's where we kind of make a little bit of a mistake, I feel. That we think, oh, God's done that for me. Well, yeah, he has, but he's done it because he's done it for himself. It's part of his plan. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about him. It's about to will and to do of his good pleasure. But how do we get into the place where he's willing to take us? How do we get to him speaking to us and answering us and having that cooperation with him that we are being used of his goodwill and pleasure? What makes him take notice of us? What makes him listen to us? What makes him answer? Big questions, really, but they are and they aren't. Fundamental, some of it goes without saying. We have to search the Bible, but there's something I've mentioned before, and I'll have to mention it again because it's relevant. It's always relevant. In anything that you do with God, it's, are you fulfilling your part of the covenant? Are you doing what God asks you to do as the basics, the fundamentals? The onus and burden of responsibility is on us. It's not on him. He has laid out the covenant, and there's no doubt he will adhere to his part. There's no way that God's going to opt out or wriggle out of what he said. That would be ridiculous. The onus is always on us. I've said before, look at your own life. If things are not well, if you're not getting answers, if you don't feel God's speaking to you, and sometimes we go through a period, we've said this before, where God has left us to see what's on our heart. We've gone through that. But we have to examine ourselves to look at where we are. That are we doing? Are we loving our brother? If you've got hate, if you're not stealing things from work or something like that, I don't know. I'm just thinking of things, you know. If you're throwing rubbish into your neighbour's yard, contrary to God's precepts, if you're not treating your neighbour well, if you're not treating your wife well, or if you're a wife, you're not obeying your husband, all these things count to God because he has laid out the rules for living. He's laid out the covenant. So having a prayer answered, having said that, is not a formula. It's not like following a recipe. It would be great, wouldn't it? Just like a recipe for a sponge cake. You have all the ingredients measured out, you mix them all together, you heat the oven up to the required temperature, you put the mixture in for the required time, and voila, out comes a delicious sponge cake. That'd be great, but it doesn't work like that, we know that. The thing is, though, about the cake, it's funny, but like any other recipe, it takes an experienced hand to bring out the best cake. Experience counts with God. Because, and if you take that in contrast to the new convert, where all the prayers are answered, I don't know if you can remember when you first came to the Lord, it just seemed that everything you asked God, he did. But he was teaching us something. But that didn't last for long. That was like an apprenticeship that didn't last long, because his expectation grew, because as we got to know him, as we developed and as he revealed himself to us, his expectations of us grew. And the situation changed. And then the relationship and the development of the relationship was down to us. Not to him, but to us. He'd done his part. He'd revealed himself to us. He'd shown us what the goal was, what the prize was, if you like, eternal life. But there's much more than that. There's rewards to be had. And that means that we get to know God, the real God. So experience counts. It doesn't mean to say you can't have your prayers answered if you've not got the experience. That's not what I'm saying. It's God sees what you're doing, at the time, and he meets you at the level you're at every time. He doesn't make a distinction in that case. He looks at what's on your heart. When I was an engineer, I say before I came to the Lord in my younger days, I had an assistant working with me, and when we'd completed a job, a task in engineering, we maybe constructed something or repaired something for a customer. I worked for a contracting engineer, so we were working all over the place on different things, petrochemical industry and steel works and you name it. I even used to go and repair a printing press for the local newspaper. But the thing was that if we were working in a group of people, as we often were, my friend, he was a Cockney fella, and he just used to shout out when we'd done a job. He says, "If you want anything doing, come and see my mate here, because he will be able to do it. It's experience," he said. "You cannot buy it. You cannot buy it. You can only hire it." And here he is. And he used to, it was just a lot of fun. But nevertheless, the banter had some truth in it, that it was experience. The experience that I'd gone through. I had a very old-fashioned type of training. I trained with some very, very excellent engineers, and they taught me a lot, and that I had that experience with them, you see. So my friend used to shout it from the housetops. So experience of relationship matters. We don't need the scriptures to tell us that. We don't need the scriptures to tell us what's obvious. We are going to be looking at scriptures. We can't miss them out. But we can't ignore the fact that relationship is something that we need. I mean, for instance, if you went up to a total stranger and asked them something, they may or they may not want to help you. And it would depend on what attitude you went in. If you went with a stroppy, belligerent attitude, they would probably shut down and don't come near me. But if you went in an attitude where you were in dire straits and you needed help, even if it was just you were asking where to catch a bus, if you went in the right attitude, they would probably help you. If you're looking for a particular street in their town and you go with the right attitude, you'll probably get the help you need. But it's always to a limit. Now, if you've got friends and you want more, then you'll know the level of friendship. If the friendship is a very long, trusting relationship and a loving relationship, then you'll know you can go to that person and ask them. You know, I don't know what it would be. It doesn't really matter, but you would know what you can ask them, and you would know pretty much, depending how well you knew them, what the answer might be. Now, the relationship with God is no different to that. It's silly to deny it. It's just a logical approach, really. And God wants us to use our intelligence as well as, you know, it's not super spiritual, if you like. It is spiritual because wisdom is spiritual. So we use our wisdom, and we can see through wisdom that relationship with God is as meaningful as a relationship with anyone on earth. I look at King David. He never failed to get an answer from God. He was a man after God's own heart. He never failed to get an answer. It wasn't always what he wanted. And God always spoke to him, and he was in trouble a few times. You know, and God punished him. But nevertheless, God always made sure that he told his servant, David. That's what he said to Abraham. Will I do this without telling my servant Abraham? Will I not share with Abraham, my friend? You see, it's there in the Bible. I'm saying we don't have to look. We don't, because it's common sense, but it is there if you want to look for it. I mean, Jesus never failed to get an answer, did he? I mean, it's too hard, I guess, thinking of Jesus, the Son of God, but nevertheless, he is our perfect role model, so we should look at him. The only one time that God deserted him, as it were, was on the cross that time, when he said, why have you deserted me? And it was for a purpose, and he knew that. And now he's in glory. He's got his reward, or he will get his reward when he comes for his bride, and he rules and reigns on this earth for 1,000 years. That's another story. So, we've not looked at the scriptures, but think about that part of it, the common sense part, before we start looking at the scriptures. We can look, and the Bible often tells us when God won't answer. So by that, you can deduce if there's something wrong. But we'll leave it there for now, and we'll meet up again next time and look at the next part of this study in when does God answer? What makes him answer? Till then, God bless. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.